Hello my friends, welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. I am trying out a new location at our new home. We've been here for 3 weeks now and I'm on the front porch this time. It's protected from the rain, not raining right now, but I'm hoping it's also more protected from the wind because I noticed you can hear the wind sound in my earlier recordings that I've done, so get a little more traffic noise, but this street's pretty quiet. Let me know what you think of the sound quality out here, okay? Appreciate that. So welcome everyone. This is a place where I talk about books. If you're new here, I'm Lindy and I read a lot, and I've been doing other things too. Like we finally got our paintings hung earlier this week. That's pretty exciting. There's art on the walls now. And I've been doing a little bit of cooking, baking mostly. I mentioned maybe last week that I got a dozen limes for $2.50, so I've been using up limes. I made a lime pound cake. I made lime and chocolate chip muffins. I made 2 different batches of lime curd, and I use chickpea flour to thicken it instead of eggs, because I am sensitive to eggs. I made lime ice cream, a lime vinaigrette, stuff like that. All the limes are now gone. As far as biblio adventures, I had 2 book clubs this week, both online, and I will talk about the books that we discussed when I get to the book portion of this video. And there are 2 book launches. I went to one on Sunday and there's another one tonight. I'm actually recording this on Thursday so that I'll have plenty of time to get it edited and posted on Friday for my Friday reads. So maybe I'll talk about the book launches in my next video because I've got other things to say. Book awards. So the Governor General Literary Awards have been announced. I will just mention the winners. In the fiction category, it was Chrysalis by Anuja Varghese. I talked about that collection of stories last week, and I am also going to recommend it for my Lesbian Plus book club. We decide a whole year in advance what books we're going to read, and that's going to happen in December when we make that decision. And I would like to reread this one, so that might be an opportunity for me to do that. In the nonfiction category, it's a memoir called Unearthing by Keel MacLear. Now, I have just downloaded the audiobook, so I haven't actually even started listening to it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I love MacLear's work that I've read in the past, and this is one of the things about literary awards is that I get either a reminder or just information that an author that I like has got something new out, as is the case here. The winner in drama is a play that I have seen. It's William Shakespeare's As You Like It, a radical retelling by Cliff Cardinal. The translation award, that for French to English, went to Rosa's Very Own Personal Revolution by Eric Dupont, translated by Peter McCambridge. The Young People's Literature text was awarded to The Probability of Everything by Sarah Everett. Sarah Everett is an Afro-Canadian. I believe she lives in Alberta, and I haven't read this yet, but I am very much planning to, and I think it is also on the Publishers Weekly Best Books of 2023. And then finally, the Young People's Literature illustration category. The winner for that one is Jack Wong's When You Can Swim. And I talked about this recently. Fantastic picture book that has received other accolades as well. It won the Boston Globe Hornbook Award. They have 3 categories. The nonfiction award winner, Sunshine by Jarrett, Krosoczka, is one I'm going to be talking about today. And the fiction category was won by Angeline Booley. And when I was looking at a website that showed the winners and the honor books, I realized that 2 of these covers were designed by the same artist, Michaela Goad, who is an Indigenous American illustrator. She's Tlingit and Haida. I think that's pretty cool to see her work on 2 different books here. And the picture book category winner was When You Can Swim by Jack Wong. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the Publishers Weekly Best of 2023. This might be one of the most exciting lists to me every year because these books are chosen by the reviewers at Publishers Weekly, and they tend to choose the kind of books that I like to read. In the top 10, there are 2 books that I loved. Ordinary Notes by Christina Sharp, and she's actually on the cover of this issue of Publishers Weekly, and also The Country of the Blind by Andrew Leland. And I talked about these books in earlier videos. Then there are a bunch of other categories. I think there's 150 books in all. In some of these other categories, there are other books that I loved, like Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma by Claire Dederer. There's a couple of picture books, including Jack Wong's When We Can Swim. Already talked about that one, but also Big by Vashti Harrison. And in the YA category, a memoir called From Here by Luma Mufle. Now that one, I listened to it in audio and I didn't even realize that it would be considered a YA nonfiction. That's the category they've put it in. Another thing about the Publishers Weekly list is it's kind of a kick in the pants to remind me to get to books that I've been meaning to read. Number 1 on this list is The Talk by Darren Bell, a graphic novel memoir about the conversation that Black parents have with their children about the dangers of being Black in the world. And also Greek Lessons by Han Kang, translated by Deborah Smith. Been meaning to get to that one too. Then there are books that I really enjoy these authors, and I didn't even know they had new books out, like Hilary Lecter's Terrace Story. I really enjoyed her Temporary. Julia Wertz has Impossible People. I love anything by Julia Wertz. Jen Shapland, she wrote my autobiography of Carson McCullers, and she's got a new one, Thin Skin, a collection of essays. And Jennifer Ackerman has a new book all about owls. I've read her Genius of Birds and The Bird Way, I think it's called. So good, so good. And then even more dangerous for me because my TBR gets so big, but these are new to me discoveries that I see on the list. So, example, a collection of short stories called Like Smoke, Like Light. It is by Yukimi Ogawa. It's a debut. She's a Japanese author who lives in Japan and writes in English, so there's no intermediary of a translator here. I downloaded the ebook, I read the first story, the title story, and I can tell already that this is right up my alley. It's like a blend of Japanese folktale inspired stories that also connect to contemporary Japanese life. So a few others that I'll mention on this list that I am excited about. Lesbian Love Story, a memoir in archives. It's by Emilia Posanza. I'm going to recommend this for my Lesbian Plus book club as well. And then one called A Rome of One's Own, Forgotten Women of the Roman Empire. It's by Emma Solon. And, okay, this, I mean, you should have seen me when I read this. Beowulf, which is a middle grade retelling of Beowulf by Weinersmith and Boulay. It's a graphic novel, middle grade. I'm really excited about this one. So stay tuned for a future video where I have read it and talk about it. Okay, on to the books that I have finished in this past week. Well, actually, I'm going to start with a DNF. I did not finish Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This one, by the way, is on that Publishers Weekly Best Books of 2023. It was the audiobook that I was listening to, read by Shayna Small and several other narrators. And it's set in the future, or an alternate America, where the privatized prison complex, they make money by having inmates act as gladiators and fight to the death. And the reason why, at the 3-hour mark, I decided this is just not for me, is because I put myself into the body of characters that I'm reading about. And it was just too heart-wrenching or harrowing to read about having to kill other human beings or be killed yourself. Ugh, yeah. These days, my emotions are really close to the surface. Many of the books that I'm going to be telling you about moved me almost to tears, which is an indication that, as I said, emotions close to the surface. Yeah, so mood plays a big part for me in my reading, and I'd like to know if any of you find the same thing. By the way, I have read another book by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, Friday Black, a collection of short stories. I gave that 5 stars, so I think that if I was in a different frame of mind, Chain Gang All-Stars would have been fine for me, but not now. Right book, wrong time, let's put it that way. Okay, now on to the 7 books that I have finished in the past week. Starting with, whoa, a fantastic historical fiction called The Adversary. It's by Michael Crummey, who is a Newfoundland author. I'm sorry, you can't really see the title because this was one of the library's fast reads. You get it for a week. And it took me 3 days or less to read it. Very engaging story set in just the turn of the 19th century, so right around 1800. And it is a companion novel to his most recent, before this, called The Innocents. You don't have to have read The Innocents, though, to read this one. It's just taking place at the very same time. In the book, The Innocents, it's about a brother and sister, siblings, who were left orphaned after their mother, father, and baby sister died of a plague and they continued to make a go of it on the rocky shore, fishing, like all on their lonesome. So the Adversary takes place kind of in the next cove over from where the Innocence takes place. There's a small community there called Mockbeggar, and there's a merchant family, brother and sister, who are at odds with each other and competing with each other. And I don't know if those are the adversaries of the title, or it's another word for the devil, and it's the kind of place where it's more like under the rule of the devil rather than God, one might think. I don't know. It starts out with the plague, the same plague that killed mother, father, and baby in the previous book. So lots of people are sick, lots of funerals. We just get such a portrayal of how hard life was at that time. And then there's the special language of that era and of that place that really adds a richness to the story, the storytelling. I can give you some examples. There was no relief from the shit fire of the man until a 30-foot bully boat with a gang of jack-tars at the oars rode into Mockbeggar a week later. They took down their lug sails as they came into the Lun of Tinkershare Head and drew up to Strap's Wharf. The descriptions of the landscape are also outstanding. Here we have another passage. By March month, a thronging herd of ice overtook the coastline on its annual migration from the Labrador Sea, the pack miles wide and grinding its monumental weight against the shore. The harbor blocked with pans rising and falling on the tide swell, like a flock of sheep rubbing tight in a paddock. Compulsive with really vivid characters and landscape. I highly recommend The Adversary. And I also recommend this next Canadian novel, Denison Avenue. It's by Christina Wong with illustrations by Daniel Innes. So you flip the book over and it is a whole series of illustrations, with the top illustration being further back in time and the bottom illustration being more contemporary, and it's showing the effects of gentrification in Toronto, in the neighborhood of Chinatown and Kensington Market. The story is about an elderly woman, Cho Sam Wong. Her husband dies at the beginning. This was one of the portions that nearly brought me to tears. And they had no children. She does not speak English very well. And this is about her lonely life afterwards and how she slowly begins to get over her grief. Some of the passages are quite poetic. There are lists as well. It's kind of in the voice of her speaking to her dead husband, Henry. She does things like meets up with a friend who is collecting bottles, and her friend convinces her that this is a good way to supplement her very meager income. She goes to the Wong Sea, the Wong Social Club, plays mahjong with her friends there. She decides to try aquafit class, and her fear that she overcomes, but her fear of even getting into a pool She's never learned how to swim, and it reminded me of Jack Wong's When You Can Swim, that picture book that I mentioned earlier. There are a few illustrations in the text part of the novel, including she still has the application for Canadian citizenship, and she is reminiscing about when she went to become a Canadian citizen. The letter says, "Dear Sir" or "Madam," which I noticed, and her husband had said to her, "They didn't even put your name on it," which I thought the very same thing. A very special thing about this book is there's a lot of conversation in Toisan, and then there's an English translation in brackets afterwards. And I discovered that if I didn't read the Romanized Toisan, then sometimes I missed out on things. So, for example, her friend Lisa asks her what she grows in her garden, and she says, "Dongwa, fugwa, mogwa, fakesam, bok choy, gyu choy, yin choy, goji, lukdo." And then in brackets, there's the English translation: winter melon, bitter melon, fuzzy melon, tomatoes, red amaranth, goji leaves, and green beans. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, bok choy. So because bok choy is the same word that we use in English, they left it out of in the editing. They left that part out. And there's other places as well where if you can figure it out, that it's close enough to the English, or it's a word that we already use in English, it's often not translated. And then there's this passage that led me down to an internet rabbit hole. So this is at the Wong Sea, the women playing mahjong. "We all sighed at the same time and did not say anything for a moment as the game continued. It was as if we were nostalgic for a time when Toisan Wa was spoken loudly from the streets of all Chinatowns, a time long gone." Which made me think, wait a minute, why would Toisan have been spoken on all Chinatowns? And I discovered that this one area in China, which is the delta of the Pearl River, is the place where many immigrants from China to North America came from. It's considered the home of overseas Chinese, which kind of surprised me because in Edmonton, where I lived for many years before I moved here to Victoria, Cantonese is the most common language. There are a lot of quiet scenes. One that comes to mind is when Cho Sum meets her friend Sim at Honest Ed's, and they're looking for the discount bread, but because they're late, pretty much the only thing left are bagels. And Cho Sum asks her friend, "Do you eat bagels?" And she said, "No, I tried once and they're too hard. My teeth aren't so good anymore." And Cho Sum tells her, "Well, you have to steam them first and they get nice and soft." And her friend says, "But then they're too soft." So they have a laugh over that. And another poignant part is when Cho Sum is going through her husband's clothing and things that are still in packages, gifts that they were given, like a new set of sheets that they were saving for good. This is the text. "Decades of saving, a life spent saving, waiting for the right time, for the right moment, a moment that never arrived, continually delayed, postponed, because we assume there will always be another time, another moment. Why do we wait?" This is a really lovely story about getting old and grief and gentrification. Next up is a book of nonfiction that I read for my feminist book club. It's called Hidden Valley Road, Inside the Mind of an American Family, and it's by Robert Kolker. This one only partly worked for me. It's about a family in Colorado with 12 children. The first 10 are boys and then 2 girls, and of the boys, 6 developed schizophrenia in their lives. And so the genetics of this family has been studied by researchers looking into what causes schizophrenia. The science and the research aspect of this book fascinated me, but I found that the biography aspects didn't interest me as much, and also I sometimes found it kind of distasteful that there was too much detail for my tastes, for example, about hallucinations, the psychosis that some of these men went through as part of their illness. I thought, maybe the example of thinking that Donald thinking that he was born of an octopus, that's enough. I don't need to have a whole page of the many delusions. It seemed to make it more of a spectacle to me, and that was, like I said, not to my taste. However, the science, and statistics. I learned that 1 in 100 people around the world are being diagnosed with schizophrenia. And that number is kind of shocking to me. Even though I do know people with schizophrenia, a close friend has schizoaffective disorder. But yeah, the sheer numbers. There's a lot of tragedy in this family, the Galvin family. Suicide. 2 of them died of the effects of the medication that they were taking to control their illness. The youngest of the family, Mary, also known as Lindsay, took over from her mother after her father had died, and her mother became too ill to look after her sons. So Lindsay has access to all that survived of her brother's medical records at the state mental hospital. We're talking 2 shopping carts full because of them being in and out of just this one facility, not counting many others that they were in as well. Here's an example of a passage of what I don't care for about the style of the writing. To be a member of the Galvin family is to never stop tripping on landmines of family history, buried in odd places, stashed away out of shame. And it's true that secrecy and shame did them a disservice, as well as the fact that at the time when these boys were younger and just being diagnosed, psychiatry was blaming mothers for these kinds of illnesses. One of the exciting things that I learned in this book is about research that's going on right now into a nutrient, choline, which they're starting out with mothers who are pregnant because they're thinking that it's right from the fetal stage that something happens in the brain or in the placenta, and that even though schizophrenia isn't usually diagnosed until post-adolescence, they're thinking that there are problems happening as the brain is still maturing from fetal times all the way through childhood. And they think that half of young school shooters actually have symptoms of developing schizophrenia. So early intervention might be an important key to this illness. And one of these brothers, Michael, he went to a commune in Tennessee in 1974 and lived there for a while. And I realized that I have the cookbook of that farm. The biography talks about the leader there, Stephen Gaskin. And here he is in my cookbook. This is the book that I learned how to make tofu from. Those were in the days in the 70s before it was easy to buy tofu at the grocery store. I used to make it myself. Are any of you familiar with the farm? Have you got other stories about the farm? I'd love to hear more. The passages describing what it was like there at the farm were quite interesting. Next up is another work of non-fiction, The Anti-Capitalist Book of Fashion by Tansy Hoskins. I listened to the audiobook. It was read by Lisa Coleman. And this is an updated version of an earlier book that Tansy Hoskins wrote, I think in about 2014, called Stitched Up. And in the intro she said about 60% of the material in this new book is new original material. So I bookmarked so many passages in the audiobook that when I went to write them down in my commonplace book, I was quite daunted. I didn't actually write them all down. Tansy Hoskins makes a very persuasive case for dismantling capitalism. And she also says that it is impossible to refuse to participate. So even for somebody like me, I like to make my own clothes, buy wool from local sheep and dye it and knit myself, or reuse textiles from the secondhand store to make clothing for myself. But this is such a small drop in the bucket compared to all of the clothing that's made worldwide, and those secondhand clothes or textiles, those have still gone through the same capitalist system. She says there's no way out of sweatshop labor or environmental devastation via an individual route. Earth, air, water, animals, human health, all of these are subject to fashion's bitter harvest, as she puts it. People are brought to the boil through a combination of poverty on the one hand and the bombardment of images of things they will never have on the other. Expecting them not to boil over is foolish. Products can be made in China or Macedonia and yet have made in Italy on the label, because all that a company needs to do for it to be made in Italy is to be polished in Italy, or even put in a box in Italy. And so the origins of garments and shoes can be disguised. In an ideal world, it would be the people who made the commodities who would be valued and respected, rather than just the commodities. She talks about throwaway culture and being sold the idea that whatever we do is okay because we can just recycle products. She talks about greenwashing. I am going to link a great CBC Marketplace video below about this whole idea of recycling in clothing and greenwashing. It's very eye-opening. Without class, there would be no fashion industry as we know it. Clothing is a key way for the rich to signal their power. There's quite a long section on fashion models as well. The average age for fashion models is around 15 years old. These young women are extremely vulnerable to exploitation. So for example, she talks about Kate Moss. When she was 16, she was photographed topless, and Moss talks about that photo shoot and how she was told that if she didn't do it, she would never work again. She went into the bathroom and cried for a while, came out and did the shoot. Another example is a modeling agency was asked to send a model partway through a shoot. They needed a new model, and what had happened was the original model was sent to the hospital because they were using really bright lights and her corneas were burnt. They didn't change the light, and so the second model was also sent to the hospital with burnt corneas. So just an example of the way human beings are treated as replaceable objects. Now, the factory conditions in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and China, Myanmar, are just horrendous. And if you're paying $5 for a shirt, then think about how much a factory worker is getting paid out of that. It is criminal. These people are being paid less than poverty wages and working as much as 69 hours a week. So capitalism is terrible. Yeah. Listen to this with an open mind, and I think you'll feel differently next time you go shopping for clothes. Okay, on to the final two books. Both of them are graphic memoirs, and both of them I gave 5 stars to, so it's kind of a toss-up, which is my favorite. I'm going to start with Sunshine, subtitled How One Camp Taught Me About Life, Death, and Hope. It's by Jarrett, Krosoczka, who wrote the Lunch Lady graphic novel series and also the award-winning memoir Hey Kiddo. Sunshine is specifically about the time when he was 16 years old, angry young man, and he volunteered at a camp for children who were suffering from very serious illness or terminal illnesses, and it changed his life. So, wow. If you want to be moved by a graphic novel memoir, this is one to pick up for sure. When I listened to Krosoczka talking about this book, he said that he had a chapter in Hey Kiddo that was about his experience at this summer camp, and his editor suggested that they pull out that chapter and that he make a separate book about it. That was really smart. And my final book, so this is my favorite of the bunch, and it was actually a reread. I first read it about 3 years ago when it first came out in 2020, and my YA book club decided to discuss this one. So I was very happy to revisit it. It's a fantastic memoir by a non-binary comics artist, Maia, and I'm going to include some scenes in here so you can see the style of the content. And that is all I've got for you today. Thank you so very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you will say hello to me down below in the comments. Let me know if anything that I've said in this video struck a chord with you. Have you read any of these books and what do you think of them? Or anything else that you want to say, even just say hello. Notice that I've got the rainbow sock flying behind me, so if you don't have anything else to say, just put a little rainbow flag down there just to let me know that you watched. Thanks so much, and I will see you all soon. You take care. Bye-bye.